In the last two keynotes, you heard a lot about software-defined networking and network functions virtualization. And so we've gathered a great panel here of a number of our ecosystem partners and vendors who are kind of experts in their area, and to share their ideas with you. And so first, let me see if we can have Charlie. You want to introduce yourself and Wind River?
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay. Hi, I'm Charlie Ashton. I'm responsible for business development at Wind River. Wind River is a software company. It's actually a subsidiary of Intel. And we provide a critical solution for NFV. We provide the infrastructure software that enables servers from companies like HP to run the virtualized applications that come from companies like Genband and ContextStream with the level of reliability that you need for telco networks and for enterprise customers.
How about you, Sharon? You want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Sharon Row. I'm a networks architect with ContextStream. ContextStream is an SDN for NFV vendor. It means that we do carrier SDN fabric that enables better utilization of NFV in the network.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. And of course, you all know Renu from Intel as well as Werner from HP. So let's go ahead and get into some of the interesting topics, and I'm waiting to hear some of the great answers our panelists are going to provide. So let's start with Sharon. We talked a lot about NFV in the last two keynotes. But a little bit, can you define a little bit more on what software-defined networking is all about? I know ContextStream is really focused on carrier SDN, so you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. So SDN, for me, is about introducing dynamicity into networks. You could even say programmability into networks. I want to specifically talk about a paradigm shift in how service functions are positioned in networks. So today, in today's network, network functions, network services are positioned in line. So you have to size them according to the traffic that hits them. You have to make sure no service is failed because it would not allow traffic to go to other services. But this placement is being changed towards optimally placing network services where it's best to place them, either in the data center or anywhere else, and then basically steer network traffic towards those service functions. So that's a major paradigm shift, and that's what SDN enables. Specifically, I'm talking about service function chaining. So you could, the network can chain services that are located in data centers, and it could load balance traffic. So traffic is split equally between service functions. And if there's a failure in one of the entities, then we can make sure traffic is steered towards the other functions. And I'm not only talking about network functions located in data centers. They can potentially be located closer to subscribers. So, you know, with all the trend of mobile edge computing and content being pushed towards subscribers, network functions, virtual network functions can be positioned closer to subscribers at the edge of the network, so the SDN network would be able to steer traffic towards those network functions, wherever they are.
Excellent, excellent. Any other panelists want to add to that on the software-defined networking? No? OK. So let me, regarding the status of the market, Werner, at Mobile World Congress this year, HP announced that Telefonica had selected HP for its Unica infrastructure. So it looks like the market is moving forward in terms of implementation for SDN and NFV. Can you comment on that and what that arrangement's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually Telefonica announced that they had made their selection on Unica and that they selected us to be the partner for that. It goes back to a little bit on my conversation, right? If you think back, Enrique Blanco, the CTO, talked about Unica already last year at Mobile World Congress, and he wanted to be much faster, right? So he wanted to be out there, he wanted to actually drive Telefonica and his peers, because if you look at what Telefonica is actually doing with Unica, it is not just looking at a telco cloud, at the cloudification of their network, they're actually combining their business side, their internal cloud, and the telco into one infrastructure. So they don't want to run it all in one seamless environment as a cloud, and they picked us to be the system integrator for that and provide obviously the infrastructure, the orchestration, the management to do that. And I think it's a great example where you have a company that got together, that got their vision together and said, we're going out there, right? Sure, Telefonica has, is one of the top carriers around the world, so they sure have resources, but they also understand that this is something where they need partners. And although we are the prime to work with them on that, there's many that are lining up, the application vendors, the traditional NEBs that are going to work out. So this is really going to be something that I believe will define NFV and how we're going to go in the rollout there. But obviously there's others. Renu mentioned Domain 2.0. Obviously we see AT&T going forward. But there's also a lot of smaller carriers around the world that pick some stuff and say we're going to go there. We had a great example this morning of Telekom Austria, right? That are also working and going ahead. So you don't have to be the biggest one to go forward. So we definitely see the market adapting.
Excellent,
much faster than we originally thought.
Yeah, Charlie, you're seeing kind of similar patterns from a Wind River perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this certainly seems to be the year, with NFV, where the service providers are moving beyond the initial trials, the initial evals, and starting to do some early deployments. We see some early use cases such as virtual business CPE functions, virtual IMS, virtual SBC, and in some parts of the world we see some early Cloud RAN deployments. So yeah, I would definitely agree that this is really the year when things are starting to happen.
Excellent, excellent. So Renu, you talked about open standards in your presentation. So what's the big deal about open? You hear OpenStack, Open NFV, Open Networking Platform, Open vSwitch. What's the whole concept behind open in NFV, and what's so important about it?
So if you look at what NFV itself is about, which is the disruption of monolithic proprietary platforms onto kind of standard high-volume hardware and software platforms. But when you look what goes on top of the standard high-volume platforms, it's really all about an open ecosystem of commercial partner solutions and products that may leverage open source and standards. It's also about open collaboration that can drive interoperability between all these partner solutions that can then go on top of the standard high-volume hardware and software technologies. So it really is not only open source or open standards, it's also about an open ecosystem and open collaboration.
I see. So I guess what you're saying is, by definition, it implies a lot of collaboration. And I think, Werner, you mentioned Open NFV as an example. And I know we have Intel network builders and Titanium as well, right? So is that kind of the concept where, just by definition, it requires vendors to work very closely with each other to provide our service provider customers with highly integrated solutions? Yeah,
absolutely. I think one of the most important questions / demands that we get when we talk to carriers is that they very clearly say they do not want to get into another vendor lock-in situation. Like they feel today that a lot of the partners that they work or used to work with over the last decades, basically, that they felt somewhat at their mercy at their update cycles, mercy at their technology. It was extremely hard to change. And ultimately, we don't necessarily believe that it will be just switch and turn and mix and match. That's probably not where the carriers will be as comfortable with, but the principle that I can change, the principle that I very simply can go and pick another vendor or pick another app or bring others into my own ecosystem is really something that we hear literally every day in the conversations. And interesting enough for us, as we have a lot of the things on our own track already, or we bring partners, we're sometimes getting that they say, well, you kind of look a little bit monolithic too, you got all of that, but we kind of always point out and say, you do not have to take everything that we have, you don't have to take all of our product, there's way more out there. So ecosystem, there's the network builders at the Open NFV Partner Program, where we have hundreds of partners that are going to come in and they're going to help you. So if you don't like that IMS, you can move to another. If you don't like that application that's doing this for you, you can go take another. And if you don't like something that has an HP brand on it and you find it with another one, that's fine too. There's still other clouds for us to play in with our partners.
Yeah, okay, good, good. And Renu, I think from an Intel network builders, that's a huge ecosystem as well, right? Is that your same experience there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you also look at, I always almost see them as intersecting Venn diagrams. You'll see partners who are part of network builders also being part of HP's Open NFV. So there's a lot of common partners, and the goal is, again, wanting to make sure that they interoperate in order to kind of create the end-to-end solutions that our service providers are looking for.
Okay, very good, very good. Yeah, Charlie, you want to add something there?
I think to a large extent it's all about removing risk for the service providers. I mean, as Werner said, the open architecture of Etsy has definitely made it possible for a large number of software companies in particular to really get into this market. And those are the kind of companies that couldn't necessarily participate in the telecom market before because so much of the architectures were closed. But from the service provider's point of view, that's great, but there's a recognition that probably most of the solutions they end up deploying will be multi-vendor solutions. And in theory, everything should just work together seamlessly, right? But in practice, there's a big gap from what the PowerPoint says to what you actually find when you start putting all the different elements of a solution together. So in order to de-risk this whole process for the service providers that we're targeting with our Titanium server product. So we put together our ecosystem, which we term Titanium Cloud, really so that we could work together with a group of companies with very detailed engineering interactions to make sure that we verify that their software and their hardware works correctly with our solution. And wherever possible, that everything has been optimized to work properly together. So the service provider doesn't have to worry about that integration and any schedule risk that will go along with that. So for us, it's a very deep engineering engagement through our partner ecosystem. It's much more than just a marketing program. And I think we're seeing the benefits of that from the service providers that we're dealing with.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Yeah, so Charlie, the next one I have is for you, and that question's all regarding reliability and redundancy and what we call carrier greatness in the current network, right? We have done that over a number of years. We've all been involved with making the current infrastructure very reliable for the service providers, right? And the question then becomes, what does that all mean when, software is eating the world and everything's moving to the cloud? What is the concept of carrier greatness or reliability in the cloud? And what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's all about protecting the service provider's top-line revenue. As they move to NFV, they do run the risk that if they're not able to maintain the level of reliability, the traditional reliability that you just spoke about, they're going to end up spending a lot of money in basically in penalties with their enterprise customers, because these enterprise customers all have service level agreements, that guarantee a certain level of reliability. And so the service providers are concerned that as they move to NFV, nasty things can happen, right? Now all the applications are virtualized, the data flows are much more complicated, VMs can be arbitrarily, migrated from one server to another. It's a much more complex system. So the way to get around that is to deploy the services on an infrastructure platform which can actually guarantee 6 nines uptime from the infrastructure platform. That then allows the services to maintain 5 nines uptime, which is the traditional measure of reliability. That sounds good to say, but in practice it's really, really hard to do. You can't get there by just taking an infrastructure platform that was designed for enterprise applications or IT applications. That's going to give you 3 nines at best. You need to have a platform that was designed from ground up for 6 nines. And it has to support things like, live migration of virtual machines. It has to automatically detect and recover from failures in the host or the guest. Has to do automatic software updates and patches. Has to do AAA security. There's a whole complex laundry list of things that you need there. In our case, we actually went out and we brought in a dedicated engineering team into the company that had this level of expertise from previous successes at other companies. And that's how we were able to develop Titanium Server to deliver this level of 6 nines reliability that is what you require.
Excellent, excellent. And Sharon, yeah.
I want to add to this, carrier greatness is also important on the SDN realm. So one effort that we do is regarding open source standardization. ODL, for example, Open Daylight, is focused on SDN controllers, and we evolve those SDN controllers to become carrier grade, including high availability, including distribution and federation of these distributed controllers. Some of the carrier grade functionality we contribute back to open source communities. And I can say that our software-based SDN switch is scalable to the level that a carrier requires. And SDN also, of course, being part of the network, must be carrier grade on all aspects.
Excellent, thank you, thank you. So that's great. So it looks like there's been some thought behind reliability in the context of cloud as well. So Renu, let me ask you this.
Actually,
yeah, go ahead.
Let me add one more point to that, because I think it comes back to the thought of the ecosystem here, right? So there's a reason probably why you chose the 4 of us to sit here, right? This is actually where we bring combined expertise together, right? To bring that and to give that safe pair or safe few pairs of hands that are going to help the industry go forward with that, right? So what Charlie and company are doing, their long experience that they have, Sharon has millions of users actually active on their ODL-based SDN controller out there with carriers here in the US, and Intel obviously behind it with their technologies. That's the aim that we're trying to do, to say, you are not alone going out there, right? You got the openness, but you also got the collaboration with the best of what companies bring in here. We've been an open source competitor for many years with OpenStack, so that was what was so compelling actually for Wind River and HP to come together and say, we're actually going to build more or less ground up a carrier-grade OpenStack distribution, which is what they're all going to talk about in Vancouver yesterday and today. We see a lot of that, but you will find few out there that actually bring decades-long experience in real-time and mission-critical operating system like Wind River and the OpenStack contribution, because this is all about the community. For the carriers, OpenStack is one of those promises to get out of the vendor lock-in and to be open, and it has to bring that high availability. And that's what I think we're all here working together to do that.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so it seems like you're saying it applies across all the horizontal layers. Yeah. So Renu, let me ask you this. So Sandra at Mobile World Congress, she talked about the aha moment regarding, okay, we're talking about NFV, SDN. Some of these concepts came from the IT world and are being applied to the network now. But then the question is, how do you take all this learnings from the carrier side in context of SDN, NFV, and how do you apply it back into the enterprise world? And so any thoughts on that?
I think virtualization kind of started already in the enterprise side. Some of the enterprises are already looking at, how do they virtualize some of the network appliances, virtual routers, virtual firewalls, virtual ADCs, etc. So some of the, if we do put carrier gradeness into them, it only makes them more highly reliable. I really think the enterprises can benefit from the high availability or high reliability of these network appliances in enterprises. They may not necessarily want some of the other telco functions like virtual RAN or virtual EPC or the other telco-specific ones, but from a network appliances or functions that the enterprises are interested in, I do believe that there is, kind of a need for the high reliability, especially as it starts to become virtualized software functions. There is going to be a need for that. So I do believe that you'll see enterprises wanting that as well. They may not use the same lingo as we do in telco, but they may phrase it differently, but you'll start to see some of those requirements starting to become very alike or similar.
Excellent. Charlie, you had some thoughts on that?
I was just reading a study the other day that it was actually going back to 2010, but it showed that in that year, North America businesses alone lost $26 billion in what they term avoidable outages. And they mentioned that the same year, every single bank globally suffered what they term a customer-facing outage. So there's a really big business incentive, and I fully agree with Renu here. There's a business incentive to figure out how do we take some of these high reliability and carrier-grade technologies that we know how to apply to telecom and apply those in the enterprise and in the cloud space as well.
Yeah, great.
I think it's also, if you look at the requirements there, they clearly in the enterprise world can benefit from it, right? I think what's so important and critical to understand on the telco and the carrier side is just that they're just the edge more out there from a criticality, right? We often hear those conversations about, well, why wouldn't we use just, build infrastructure like a Facebook has or infrastructure like a Google has, right? Carriers live in a different world. It's not, a dozen or a couple more applications that are running there, and if your Facebook is down for a couple seconds, yeah, well, it'll come back, right? And you probably blame your carrier for it and not Facebook anyways. But you can't have that in the network, right? So it's nice to have for the enterprises, but it's critical for the telcos. Eventually, depending on their business models, we probably see a lot more enterprises going there. If you think about automotive, right, you definitely don't want to have an outage there. Or if you heard about the doctor doing hypnosis in the morning, you probably don't want the network go down when you're on your bench and you're hypnotized, right? So.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think maybe this is one of the last questions, and I think we need to talk about the business aspects a little bit here. And the question is, of course, operational expenditures in the networks is one of the many reasons that the carriers want to implement this technology, right? And services agility and others. So what are some of the new business models? You've heard about as-a-service model, outcome-based models. Werner, what are you seeing out there in terms of the vendor, carrier, or service provider relationship in terms of these business models?
Yeah, I think a lot of the first focus was on OpEx and CapEx savings, right, in the very beginning. But I think agility and new services has kind of again won the upper hand there, and looking at new models, and especially when you talk with the larger vendors, then there is the expectations that these will provide different models. And for instance, we have carriers that are asking us to basically provide new NFVI, network functions virtualization infrastructure, on an as-a-service basis, and help them to kind of like build out this infrastructure and then start actually deploying customers onto it gradually and start paying for it as soon as they actually then go and move their customers. So that's one business model we're looking in, and how we can actually support a customer, the carriers doing that with HP Financial Services. Obviously could be a big play in there. That's one of the models, and other models are all the way going to the kind of like cost-sharing pieces, right? So if you run your app on my network, right, maybe I'll pay you over time for that. I don't want to pay normal license fees. I want to go to usage and utility models. That's what we hear from most of the ISVs that are in the program, that are saying that's new for them as well, to look at the carriers want to consume their software and their applications in a different fashion.
Yeah, so things like, you mentioned fail fast, and these kind of models allow that to happen more effectively. It's almost a win-win or lose-lose kind of a situation, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, excellent. Any other comment on that?
I'll just make a quick comment there. I think over the next year or so, we're going to see some very new licensing models spring up in terms of how the applications get licensed to the service providers, because there's going to be kind of a pay-as-you-go model, licensing model, which is very untypical and almost unknown in this industry. So I think that's going to be one very interesting area that probably over the next 12 to 24 months, there's going to be a lot of development in that area.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
One other piece that comes to mind, obviously, is the change in having that one company that used to do it all for you, that provided all, and you had the tight SLAs, and you had the liquidated damages that you had in your contract if something went down. That is also changing from a model. We see there is more thought now around, yes, we understand that we probably have to have a couple more. We, as a carrier, have to look at an ecosystem of partners and define how that looks like. So the availability will look different than it used to. That comes obviously with the cost saving, that you don't have the monolithic pieces anymore. So there is new models around that, how you can actually collaborate there and bring this uptime little less that, you send me the big check if my network is down, but really more how do we together build that it's not going to even happen in the first place.
Excellent. Any comments, Renu?
One thing I know that we do get asked a lot about is, can we help the carriers determine what the total cost of ownership is? For each one of the functions, they want to know, hey, how many cores do I need? How much memory do I need? Or how much CPU do I need? And then the other thing that we get asked is also around system integration, because with the model becoming more disruptive and open with multiple partners, it kind of goes back to also who's going to help me put all of these things together. So the system integrator is extremely key in this new model as well.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so maybe I'll give you a chance on any questions from the audience if we have, since we have these panelists here that have been working on this technology and business models. Okay, then I guess, oh, there's one here? Yeah, go ahead. That's a great question. So that's Akshay Sharma from Gartner, and the question he has is, what's the next thing to be virtualized? Voice has been virtualized already, so yeah, that's a good question. Any comments from the panelists there?
I think the couple of the first ones that we're starting to see is definitely on the edge, the virtual CPE, the customer premise edge, that definitely helps with some immediate OpEx savings, the truck rollout, but it's also kind of one of the less riskier workloads to virtualize first, so it's the virtual CPE. I've heard of the next one being kind of the virtual IMS. With the whole video, video and multimedia traffic going up so high, the virtual IMS kind of seems to be the next one on the list. Carriers are also looking at the virtual EPC, but virtual EPC is also extremely complex, so it's not something that you can just kind of flip overnight or within a short period of time.
Charlie?
Yeah, I think especially in certain geographies, I'm thinking mainly of China, Japan, and South Korea. Where the population density in the cities is so high, I think we're going to see a lot of adoption of cloud RAN over the next couple of years. That may be a little slower to take off, in Europe and in North America, but certainly in Asia, I think we'll see that.
Okay, excellent. So maybe we'll end with some closing comments. Sorry, Sharon, you had a
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we see all those use cases mentioned. Business services is something else we see. Business VPN services, business CPE. And in general, I think carriers would invest when they're experiencing, when they need to go to network expansions and introduce new services and new technologies. That's when they might choose NFV and SDN. These are going to be their first experiences with those technologies.
Very good, very good. Okay, so I guess we'll allow the panelists to have some closing remarks. Werner, you want to start? Any additional thoughts on the area here?
I already gave my keynote, so I got to spread all my wisdom here. But first, I want to thank Janman for having us, giving us the opportunity to be with you. sponsoring here. And again, I just want to reiterate that let's get started. There's a great bunch of companies out there. Amongst us, you will find use cases, you will find deployments, and no matter if you're a carrier, cable operator, or an ISV or technology companies, jump on the train. It is about to leave the station, or it's already moving. And I think this is where you got to go if you want to grow and harvest all the promises that NFV is bringing you. And I can promise you that all of us here, we're investing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars every year into the innovation that goes into this new network, into this new breed of network. And we will invite you to be part of that and make best use of that.
Well said. Anything else, anybody?
No, I think one thing that we don't traditionally look at, because we're technology companies, is the business processes aspect. I think that's going to be really critical in this whole transformation. And I think service providers are cognizant of that, and I think they're more worried about the business processes than even the technology transformation.
Yeah. All right, great. Thank you so much, panel.